Why do you keep walking back into pain you swear you've outgrown? You've changed jobs. You've left that toxic relationship. You've cut ties, burned bridges, and packed your life into boxes more times than you care to admit. New faces, new habits, new routines. You told yourself this would be a fresh start. But weeks, maybe months later, the same old feeling creeps in again. That quiet ache in your chest. That sense of not being enough, that needs to be fixed, to chase, to prove. You start asking, why does this keep happening to me? But maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the better one is, why do I keep choosing what hurts me? As if I don't know any better. Here's the truth. You're not addicted to struggle. You're addicted to familiar pain. There is a part of you that finds comfort in what you already know, even if it is painful, especially if it's painful. Because pain you recognize feels safer than peace you don't trust. This is not a weakness. This is psychology. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, called this a repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate early emotional wounds. Not because we enjoy them, but because we understand them. We replay the same internal scripts, hoping that this time the ending might change. But of course it doesn't. So you find yourself in a different place, with different people, but living the same emotional story. And every time you repeat it, the wound goes deeper, and healing feels further away. This video isn't just about pain. It's about pattern. It's about seeing how the familiar becomes the enemy of growth. And how breaking free doesn't start with trying harder. It starts with seeing clearly. If you've ever felt stuck in an emotional loop you can't explain, you're not alone. You're not broken. But you are being pulled by something powerful. And it's time to understand what and why. Before we dive deeper, if this message is already resonating with you, if you've ever felt caught in a loop of emotional patterns you can't quite explain, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Not because I need the numbers, but because I want you to be the first to receive the next video, the next insight that might just shift something inside you. I don't publish fluff. Every video here is made to stir something real. Now let's go deeper. You say you've learned your lesson, that you're done with emotionally unavailable partners. This time, you'll choose better. You promise yourself that you won't fall for someone who talks in circles, who disappears when it matters, who makes you question your worth. But then, somehow, it happens again. Different name, same story. Maybe it starts out feeling new, exciting, even promising. But after a while, the dynamic feels eerily familiar. You're chasing, shrinking, overgiving. You find yourself walking on eggshells, rationalizing red flags, calling it chemistry or just bad timing. You end up in pain, not because you didn't see it coming, but because a part of you walked straight into it. Again, why? Why do you keep choosing people who trigger the same wounds? Why do you enter rooms that feel like déjà vu? Why does chaos feel more natural than calm? Let's be honest, most people don't consciously choose pain. No one wakes up saying, I'd like to be emotionally neglected today. But somewhere deep inside, beyond your awareness, something else is choosing. And it isn't choosing what is good for you. It is choosing what is familiar. There's a strange gravitational pull toward what we already know, even if what we know is dysfunction, even if what we know is heartbreak. Because what is familiar feels safer than what is foreign, especially when you were raised in environments where love came with tension, silence, or unpredictability. So when someone shows you stability, presence, or healthy affection, it doesn't feel safe, it feels boring. Or worse, suspicious. You question their motives. You feel uneasy in their calm. And your nervous system, primed for survival, not peace, quietly pulls you back toward what it recognizes. Toward what hurts in just the right way. Let's be even more specific. Maybe you grew up with a parent who was emotionally distant. As a child, you had to work hard to be noticed, to be enough, to be loved. Fast forward to adulthood, and guess what kind of partner feels like home? The one who's hard to reach. The one who leaves you guessing. The one who makes you feel like you have to earn their presence. Not because you want that, but because your nervous system knows that. That pattern is etched into your emotional DNA. You've confused anxiety with intimacy, effort with worth. And so you repeat, again and again. This doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means your brain, in a well-meaning, but outdated way, is trying to protect you. It's using old survival maps to navigate new territory. But those maps were drawn by a younger version of you. A version that didn't have choices. A version that thought, this must be what love feels like. And here's the kicker. The more intense the pain, the more real it feels. Because if it feels just like it did back then, it must mean it matters. Right. Wrong. That's not love. That's emotional reenactment. And it's not just about romantic partners. Think about how you handle stress. Do you notice how, even when life is stable, you find a way to stir chaos? To worry obsessively? To overwork? To pick fights? That's not because you enjoy drama. It's because your mind has been conditioned to associate peace with danger, stillness with exposure. So your psyche, without realizing it, reaches for noise, for tasks, for problems to fix. Because in your inner world, silence is scary. You might even sabotage good things. A job that's going well, you suddenly feel restless. A friend who's loyal, you pull away. A moment of calm, you find something to stress about. Not because you're flawed, but because something inside you doesn't trust things that don't hurt. This is the tragedy of familiar pain. It masks itself as identity. You begin to think, maybe this is just who I am. Maybe I'm just someone who loves too hard, or overthinks, or always ends up alone. But that's not true. You're not addicted to drama. You're not drawn to toxic love. You're simply echoing the past, because no one ever taught you that safety could feel soft, not sharp. That love could feel grounding, not gripping. That calm isn't something to fear, it's something you deserve. But to claim that, you have to first see the pattern. You have to become curious, not ashamed. You have to look at the part of you that keeps running back to what broke you and ask, what are you still trying to fix? Because behind every repetition is a need that was never met, a wound that was never seen. A younger you is still hoping the story will end differently. And it can, but only when you stop acting from survival and start acting from awareness. Sigmund Freud once said, man is not a creature of logic, but of instinct, shaped not by what he knows, but by what he survived. For anyone who's ever found themselves stuck in the same kind of pain, again and again, this insight hits like a quiet thunder. You might believe you're making conscious choices, that you're choosing your relationships, your career, your reactions with reason and free will. But according to Freud, much of what we call choice is actually a manifestation of something deeper, the unconscious. A hidden world within us formed during early life experiences that silently governs our adult behaviors. At the core of Freud's work lies a concept called repetition compulsion. It refers to our unconscious drive to relive and repeat old emotional wounds, especially those that were never processed or resolved. And we don't do this because we enjoy the pain. We do it because our psyche is trying to master it. Think of it like this. If something broke you once, abandonment, rejection, coldness, emotional neglect, your mind doesn't just move on. It buries that experience, but doesn't forget it. And one day, without realizing it, you walk into a similar situation, hoping that this time it will go differently. This time you'll finally win the love, or prove your worth, or rewrite the story. But the unconscious isn't strategic. It's not planning your healing. It's just replaying the tape, over and over again, until you become aware enough to stop it. Let's break this down with a real-world example. Imagine someone who grew up in a household where love was conditional. A parent who only showed warmth when they performed, got good grades, stayed quiet, and did what was expected. Love came with terms, and any mistake led to emotional withdrawal, silence, distance, coldness. To a child, that coldness becomes emotionally catastrophic. But the child doesn't have the tools to understand it, so the nervous system adapts. It learns, I must earn love, I must not be upset. I must not need too much. That becomes the survival rulebook. Now that child grows up. As an adult, they might say they want unconditional love, safety, warmth. But when someone genuinely offers that to them, a partner who's open, emotionally present, secure, they feel off, disconnected, bored even. Why? Because the experience doesn't match the emotional blueprint. Instead, they're drawn to someone more familiar, someone who's slightly distant, hard to read, unavailable. It feels like chemistry, but it's not, it's recognition. And the deeper truth is chilling. What they really attracted to is a new version of their original wound, hoping to finally get it right. That's repetition compulsion. And it doesn't just apply to romantic relationships. It can show up in friendships, work dynamics, and even the way we relate to ourselves. Someone who is criticized constantly as a child may become their own harshest inner critic. Someone who had to be the emotional caretaker in their family may seek out friendships where they always the rescuer, burning themselves out trying to save people who never asked for it, but expect it anyway. In each of these cases, we're not consciously seeking pain. We're unconsciously seeking resolution, trying to complete a puzzle with the same broken pieces, hoping the picture will somehow change. But here's the hard truth. You cannot heal a wound by returning to the same blade that cut you. What Freud's theory suggests, and what modern psychology continues to confirm, is that we're driven far less by logic than we like to believe. Our repeated patterns aren't accidents. They're messages from the unconscious, crying out to be seen, acknowledged, and interrupted. Now here's where this becomes both terrifying and liberating. As long as these patterns stay in the dark, they control you. As Freud famously said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, your bad luck in love, your curse of always choosing the wrong people, your feeling of always being too much or not enough. These aren't just flaws in your personality. They're scripts you've been given. Scripts you didn't write, but you keep acting out. And the moment you begin to see them clearly, the spell breaks. That doesn't mean the urge to repeat will vanish overnight. These patterns are often decades in the making. But awareness is the crack in the armor. The more you observe the impulse, why does this feel so compelling? Who does this remind me of? What wound am I trying to fix here? The more you separate yourself from your programming, that's the beginning of freedom. Because here's what Freud's insight ultimately offers us: compassion. You're not weak for repeating what hurt you. You're not foolish for choosing the wrong people. You were trying to find your way back to a place where you once felt powerless, in hopes of reclaiming your agency, in hopes of rewriting the ending. The tragedy is that until you become conscious of that effort, you just keep living the same story. But the beauty? Once you see the pattern, you're no longer inside it. You become the observer, the author, the adult who can give your younger self what they never received: safety, awareness, choice. By now, you may have realized something unsettling. You're not chasing pain because you enjoy it. You're chasing pain because somewhere along the way, it became part of your identity. That low-grade anxiety you carry, that constant need to prove yourself, that subtle self-doubt always humming in the background. It doesn't feel good, but it feels familiar. And more importantly, it feels like you. This is where the shift begins. You see, healing doesn't just involve letting go of what hurt you. It requires letting go of who you became to survive that hurt. And that's terrifying. Because if you've been living in struggle for years, if your nervous system has calibrated itself to crisis, rejection, abandonment, then calm won't feel peaceful at first. It will feel foreign, maybe even wrong. That's why so many people unconsciously sabotage good things. You meet someone who's kind, consistent, emotionally available, and suddenly you feel bored. You tell yourself there's no spark, but it's not that they're not right for you. It's that their love doesn't activate your trauma. It doesn't light up your defenses. It doesn't validate the story you've carried for so long. I have to work for love. I have to be more. I have to fix people to be worthy. Without that old emotional tension, you don't know who to be. So you walk away, not because you're broken, but because peace still feels unsafe. Let us say that again. Peace can feel unsafe if you've only known love through pain. This is the paradox of healing. Everyone says they want to feel better. But when you've built your entire personality around pain, when it has been your compass, your motivation, your identity, then joy becomes destabilizing. Happiness becomes suspicious. You start waiting for the other shoe to drop. You don't trust good things because good things have never lasted. This is where most people get stuck. Not because they're incapable of change, but because they don't realize that comfort zones aren't always comfortable. They read just familiar, and you will always gravitate toward the familiar. Not because it's what you want, but because it's what your nervous system recognizes as normal. Here's an example. Imagine someone who grew up in chaos. Loud voices, unpredictable moods, love laced with tension. That person might say, I just want peace. I want stability. And maybe they mean it. But put them in a quiet home with someone who's emotionally steady, and they'll start feeling restless, anxious, on edge. Not because anything is wrong, but because everything is too quiet. They're used to scanning for danger, solving problems, anticipating the next emotional storm. When that storm never comes, the silence becomes deafening. And the brain, hungry for the familiar rhythm of chaos, creates new problems just to feel at home. That's the pull of emotional identity. It's not about logic. It's about pattern. You not addicted to being hurt. You re-addicted to what makes you feel like yourself. And this is where the real work begins. Because healing isn't just about adding new habits. It's about grieving the version of you that existed inside the wound. The version of you that learned to survive by overachieving, or caretaking, or disappearing, or keeping the peace at all costs. You have to ask yourself, who am I without my pain? Who am I when I'm not trying to be enough? That's not an easy question. It might feel like staring into a void, but that void isn't emptiness, it's freedom. It's the beginning of becoming someone new. And no, this transformation doesn't happen overnight. The old self will fight to stay alive. It will whisper familiar stories. It will pull you toward what you've always known. But with every conscious choice, every moment you say no to an old trigger, every time you sit with peace instead of running from it, you chip away at the illusion that struggle is your home. You begin to build a new home. One that's rooted not in fear, but in awareness. Not in survival, but in connection. One where love doesn't require sacrifice. Where silence isn't dangerous. Where your worth isn't negotiated every day. And maybe, at first, that home will feel unfamiliar. Maybe you'll miss the chaos. Maybe you'll reach for it like a reflex. That's okay. The goal is not to shame the old self. The goal is to understand it, to thank it for getting you through, and then gently, patiently, release it. Because you deserve more than what you've known. You deserve a life where safety isn't the absence of triggers, but the presence of self-trust. A life where peace doesn't scare you. A life where love doesn't hurt. But to live that life, you have to stop confusing identity with injury. You have to let go of who you became just to feel real. Because you're not your trauma. You're not your past. You're not the familiar pain you keep mistaking for truth. You're someone who's learning, slowly, courageously, that there's a version of you who exists beyond survival. A version that can feel joy without guilt, stillness without fear, love without pain. And that version of you isn't far away. They're just on the other side of the familiar. Let's be clear, the goal is not to delete your past. You don't need to erase the pain, the memories, or the parts of yourself that were born in survival. You don't need to wage war against the old version of you. You simply need to see it clearly and choose differently. That's where the power lies. Not in perfection, not in pretending to be healed, but in awareness. Because once something becomes conscious, it loses its grip. And as Freud famously said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The pain you've repeated wasn't fate, it was programming. It wasn't the universe trying to punish you. It was your unconscious trying to finish a story that never had a real ending. Trying to go back to the scene of the hurt, hoping that this time you'd be loved the way you always needed. But you don't have to finish that story the same way. You don't have to keep acting out the same emotional play with new actors. You don't have to relive the same goodbye with a different name. You can choose a new path, one that begins with the simplest, hardest step of all, noticing. Start by noticing when your body reacts faster than your mind, when someone pulls away and you feel an old panic rise, when love feels like a chase, when silence feels like punishment, when peace makes you restless. Notice those moments. Not to shame yourself, but to meet yourself. Because every trigger, every pattern, every pull toward what hurts, it's not a weakness. It's information. It's your nervous system speaking the language it learned long ago, and now you're learning to speak a new one. This is what real healing looks like. Not a clean break from the past, but a daily choice to respond with consciousness instead of reflex. To recognize that familiar pain doesn't equal truth. That just because something feels like home doesn't mean it's where you belong. In fact, the moment you start healing, life will feel weird. It won't feel like joy at first. It might feel like a loss, like disorientation, because your inner compass, the one that pointed you toward chaos, is recalibrating. This is the moment most people turn back. When they think, if this feels this uncomfortable, it must be wrong. But here's what you must understand. If your pain feels familiar, don't trust it. Question it. Trace it. And most of all, dare to live a life that feels alien, because healing always is. Yes, healing will feel strange. Not because it's wrong, but because it's new. You are entering territory your nervous system has never known. And of course it's going to protest. Of course, it's going to miss the emotional rhythm it's danced to for years. But don't confuse discomfort with danger. Don't mistake unfamiliarity for a bad decision. Growth always feels awkward before it feels empowering. Freedom is uncomfortable at first, especially for those who've lived in cages they couldn't see. So what now? Start small. Don't try to reinvent your whole life in a day. Start by noticing your autopilot, the way you silence your needs, the way you apologize for taking up space, the way you choose people who don't choose you back, the way you abandon yourself to feel temporarily safe. Then pause. Interrupt the pattern, even if just for a moment. That pause is sacred. It's where the unconscious becomes conscious. It's where the fate you were handed becomes the life you design. It is where the little you who learned pain was normal finally meets the adult you who says, "We don't have to do it that way anymore." And when that happens, even once, you've already changed. You've already begun. Because healing isn't a destination. It's not a certificate you earn. It's a shift in direction. A deep, often invisible act of rebellion against everything you were taught to normalize. It's saying no when you used to say yes. It's choosing stillness when you used to choose chaos. It's staying when your instinct is to run. It's walking away when your trauma wants to cling. And above all, it's remembering that your story isn't finished, not until you choose the ending. So here you are. Awake, aware, not perfect, but present. You've seen the pattern. You've heard the call. You felt the pull toward freedom. Now it's time to answer. If this message stirred something in you, if it helped you see your pain through a different lens, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next conversation that might shift your perspective again. I create these videos not for the masses, but for the few who are truly ready to look inward. And I'd love to hear from you. What part of this video resonated with you most? Leave a comment below. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. We're not healing alone. We're awakening together.